Well, folks, we've got one of the Rethink Real Estate family back into the swing of things is Mr. Jesse Salas. Jesse, welcome again.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Love being here.
Mate, you're becoming, part of the furniture, really, aren't you?
I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but I'll go with the latter.
Hey, I think you know what? Let's go with good thing. Let's
Knowing
go.
you.
Yeah, it'll have an underhanded statement later. Um,
Always, always.
Jesse, bringing you back today to talk about expired listings, I think it's one of the things that has definitely been a topic for a long time. First of all, let's actually talk about just general cold calling because a lot of agents hate the word cold calling. I was actually on some
Yeah.
business plans today where, when we're going through and doing the business plans, I talk about, well, what ways do you actually prospect? And I'm like, guys, feel comfortable. I want you to be comfortable in this environment. Like, let's talk about cold calling. How do you feel about it? They're like, no way. Why do you think
Yeah.
people don't like cold calling?
They're afraid. I mean, who wants to call somebody that has no clue who you are and quite frankly doesn't want to talk to you because they've gotten about 15, 20 other calls from other real estate agents that say that they can do the same thing. It's it's a scary place to be very honest with you. There's a lot of people that love doing it, and there's most people that really dislike it.
You've become very skilled at it, mate, and also not to mention your agents that you've got in the San Diego corridor and out in the Inland Empire as well. It's become a pretty large part of the business. Pre-COVID, it was a huge part of our business. Like it was gigantic. Obviously, we have the
Yeah.
non-distressed auction strategy, which then is a very different approach, and we can talk more about that. But how did you get people over the fear of actually making a phone call?
I don't know if I actually got them over the fear, to be honest with you. I think it was one of those things where you just have to jump, no matter how scary it looks, down there, you got to just do it and jump. I did tweak things slightly. Hopefully that registered that mindset shift for the agents is that if you really want to learn how to handle all objections, whether it's sitting in the dining room at the listing presentation table, at an open house, wherever it may be. If you want to fast forward your skills, call expireds, right? If you could handle an expired listing, if you can handle an expired call, you're going to have no problem at all with any other objection that you're given. And I think for a lot of agents, that resonated with them to be able to be, let's be honest, real estate is a slow process, right? From gathering business, a prospect to a client to a closing. There's so many pitfalls that can happen, and I think it's just human nature. We want results quickly. Um, when you've had a real estate agent in the business for a little bit of time and they're hungry to get something quicker, to sooner to pay those bills, to get a client, expireds is a fast track to get them there.
So the other part of all of this is that I've seen a lot of people make excuses. Like again, I think it was Alex Hermosi or somebody said, the pain of the current situation has to be painful enough for someone to change. So the pain of not doing enough business or the traditional way of doing things not working for somebody obviously has to be a motivating factor for them to pick up the phone. But where does somebody start, Jesse? I know that we've got a particular system that we use internally, but if I'm somebody external to us, is that where do I start? Is it Vulcan 7? Is it what company would it be to actually find the numbers to make phone calls to expireds and FISBOs?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of really good companies out there. We have our own systems internally in our office, but I do use Vulcan. I've used Vulcan for some time. Espresso Agent, Land Voice, RedX, Mojo. There's a ton of them out there. Honestly, I'm comfortable with Vulcan. I like their system. Are the quality of numbers better? I don't know. Again, I've tried them all. I don't think it really matters. I think what matters is the consistency of just making the actual calls.
Yeah, you're so right. And obviously, your business, you've had a great deal of success, and somebody would actually be listening to this podcast and probably getting to know you now, Jesse, as a frequent guest on it. Going, well, Jesse's a charismatic type of guy, and he can speak really well and whatever. What if people like don't have that charisma or that energy over the phone? What would you say from a practice perspective for them that they could try and get better with it?
Look, I'm not a huge fan of scripts, although I use them. Right? You have to learn the scripts. I've been in coaching for 8 or 9 years now. I role play every week. So it's easy for me to say those scripts. I know people think they sound robotic. I know that sounds salesy, but the reality is they work. Once you've figured out those scripts, once you understand the scripts, I think it's a little bit easier to make them your own, right? It's a little bit easier to be yourself and then incorporate some of those extremely important questions. But I think the problem that we have as agents is the approach of the expired listing. We expect them just to pick up the phone and say, Come on into my home and list with me."
Yeah.
Right? It's not practical. It's not going to happen. We have to understand that it's a process to, first of all, just make sure that the phone number is correct. Get them on the phone, right? Once you get them on the phone, get past that wall that immediately comes up, right? That every seller has. I don't need you. I'm not selling. I'm working with my same agent. And quite frankly, Ben, there's probably about five objections that you always deal with. So, although I've seen scripts out there that say there's 20, 30, or 40 objections you have to learn, if you're calling expired, just worry about five. That's it.
What are they,
Right.
mate? Can you give us the examples of what they are?
Yeah, some of them I just mentioned, right? Hey, we're using our same agent. We just decided to use that agent. We're selling it ourselves. That's a big one. We decided to wait. We're going to sell it in 2 months, 3 months. We're going to sell it next year. Right? We decided not to sell. Oh, all you agents are the same. You couldn't sell my home. All right. Every once in a while, you'll get one of those. Hey, did you see my home when it's on the market?
Hmm.
Which, what does that have to do with anything, quite
Which
honestly?
is a passive aggressive way of going, you don't care about me anyway. So yeah.
Yeah. But I think what we also have to recognize is that you had a real estate agent in the house of that seller who gave them promises, right? That they were going to close at a particular price. And what ends up happening is when the home isn't selling, as real estate agents, we really only have a couple tricks up our sleeve to try to get the property sold, right? Number one is lower the price. That's not something that I've ever found a seller wanting to do,
Absolutely not.
right? Number two is let's trick buyers into thinking it's new by taking it off the MLS and putting it right back on, right? Reset the clock. Um, to me, both of those things actually do harm to the property. In some cases, they may be needed, but as real estate agents, we tend to jump to that very quickly. So, what you're doing, by the way, when you take it off the MLS and put it back on, you have people like me and 100 other people also calling them just to upset them, right? So fast forward to when the listing ends, the agreement ends, and the home hasn't sold. You have now a seller that is extremely frustrated with the process and ultimately probably frustrated with the agent as well. And we all get lumped together. So
Yeah.
when we call to say that we can help, and there's some really good agents out there that I know that are calling, like myself, that have a genuine passion to help them to get the property sold, but we're just categorized as all of you agents are the same. One couldn't sell my home, therefore you can't sell my home. And I don't think if we don't recognize that, if we as agents think a simple script is going to solve that problem or break down that wall, that barrier that the seller puts up, that's where I see most agents fail, right? Their
Yeah.
expectations aren't in alignment with what's really out there.
So Jesse, these are all phenomenal points in all of this, but and it's great to have the awareness of that. But how do you change that? What questions can you ask? How do you handle those five objections up front? How do you is it just question orientated that you can flip the tables or turn the tables?
Well, I think a couple things you have to realize first too is you have to realize what type of expired listing is this? Is this what I like to call a true expired or a fake expired? And what I mean by that is this a true expired in the sense that the agent did everything they could, it couldn't sell, and so the contract is no longer there, right? The seller may be open to working with somebody else. Or is this a fake expired? Is this a situation where the real estate agent has gone back to their client, their seller, and said, hey, look, I think we need to take the home off the market, right? Let it sit maybe for 24, 48 hours, and we'll put it right back on. And buyers are going to now start seeing emails and alerts saying that there's a new property out there. And the reason why I say that you need to identify that, like as the phone is ringing, is because your message needs to be a little different. And what I commonly say to my agents, which sounds kind of funny, but it's similar to a relationship, right? If I see a girl that I want to date and I know that her relationship's not doing really well, they've broken up, there's a good opportunity that I might be able to come in and ask for, hey, would you like to go have a drink? Would you like to have a cup of coffee? She might be open and accepting that. Now, mind you, she probably thinks all men are horrible and she may not be ready to, but she's at least open to because she's not tied to anybody. Right. And it's the same thing with agents. All agents are the same. I'm not ready to work with an agent because I just think you're all horrible. If this is a fake expired, same relationship analogy, but in this case, that that relationship is still ongoing. It may be rocky. It may not be the best relationship, but they're trying to work it out. Right. And so now if I come in and I start really poking holes in what the other agent did, right? That seller is going to get defensive.
Yeah.
Wait a minute. Wait a minute. This is my agent. This is part of our plan. This is what we're doing to have success, right? And it would be the same thing if I'm going to to talk to a girl that's still trying to work on that relationship, right? Well, wait a minute. We're working on things. Yeah, he's probably a bad person. He or she's a bad person, but I still have faith. I'm still attached. I'm still tied to that person, and I think that's extremely important because there's a lot of failure in expired listings. And again, from a mindset perspective, so we don't get worn down, we have to identify, is it a fake expired or a true expired right up front, so we know how to handle it, right? Are we
Yeah.
going after the listing, or are we living to fight another day?
It's so important, Jesse, that people think about it this way because I've never even considered that. The factor is that imagine you going in there and poking holes in the theory of what their agent said is the plan. Like you said, it just becomes a defense. Like they just get really defensive really early on. So again, never even thought of that approach. I think that that is absolutely incredible to make sure that we're thinking of that, making sure that we're understanding that they're hurt in the relationship. If it is a true expired, they're hurt. But in the other side of it, they're still connected to that person. They're working it out. And let's not try and get them really defensive because then they just won't list with you for the sake of listing with you. They won't listen to you for the sake of just not listening to you in its entirety. So
Exactly.
leading into that, now you figured out of which one it really is. How do you go about both ways? Like, what are the next steps in that conversation?
So we'll start with the fake expired first, right? If we'll go back to that analogy, if there's somebody that I really had my eye on, but I know they're trying to work it out, I'd probably go to that person and say, hey, look, I wish you luck. I know you guys are working on the relationship, but, I think you deserve better.
Yep.
Uh, Respect yourself. If you start seeing any red flags, if he's not treating you right, if he's not making you feel the way you should be, felt, then you might want to look to get out of that relationship. Hey, maybe me. I mean, I don't know if I'd go that far, but right. And I'd be saying the same thing to the fake expired, to the seller. Hey, Mr. Seller, I respect that. I think that's great that your agent is still trying to get that property sold. But in the rare event that it doesn't, right? I'd look for three red flags, right? One of those red flags being if they ask you to lower the price. Number two, if the phone stops ringing. And the third red flag would be if you're seeing less and less people, showing up to open houses or less showings. If it's any one of those three red flags, God forbid all three of them, then I think that's when you need to say to yourself, hey, maybe I need to explore and see what other options are out there when it comes to a real estate agent. Now, I say that, Ben, because I think all three of those things are extremely important, but I also say those three red flags for a reason. Because when I decide to call back, I'll usually ask if it's okay if I could call back at a later date to just check up on and hey, maybe congratulate you to see that the home's in escrow. Um, by then, the number of real estate agents that have knocked on a door, sent a letter, or called is ridiculous.
Yeah.
And it's not realistic for me to think just because we had a nice conversation that when I call back a week later, that they're going to remember me immediately. Oh, I remember your name. They don't. So it's easier for me to go in and say, hey, we talked a couple weeks ago. I was the guy that talked about the three red flags. Do you remember that? The red flags immediately, right, trigger something. I remember talking to you. So
That's great. That's really
go ahead.
good. Just a quick question though on that. I just want to
Yeah.
butt in for a second. Is that let's say that in that conversation they say, no, no, don't follow up with me. Do you still follow up?
Yeah, I'm still gonna follow up.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's
I'll definitely follow up. I mean, I'm probably gonna do something when I get off that phone call. If it was a nice phone call, if it's warranted, I'll probably send a video text message. I'll send, or maybe I'll text a digital business card. Maybe if it's an older client, I'll send an old-fashioned handwritten thank you card. Hey, thanks for the opportunity to talk to you. I hope the property sells. If not, here's my business card. Right. So I wanna also connect the dots because I think the other problem we have is that we just rely on this phone and we're just a
Mm,
voice.
yep,
Again, they're not going to remember our name. They're
yep,
not going to remember who we work for. There's just, we're a voice. That's it. If I could somehow connect the voice, right, to a photo, to a name, all of those combined is really helpful when I come back,
yep.
right, to have some success to remember. Oh, yeah, this is somebody I remember. This is somebody I not only remember, but I like versus all of the other people I disliked because they
Yep.
were rude or they were offensive or whatever else is out there.
Yeah, no, but also to lead into the follow up phone call of that fake expired, so to speak, and then correlate your like you with the three red flags of not enough, ask to reduce the price, phone stops ringing, not enough showings or less people turning up to the open. Is that one? It dives back into those things of saying, hey, have any of those things happened? Is that how you then dive into that phone call?
Absolutely. Yeah. So once they remember that, oh yeah, three red flags, I will repeat that, right? Hey, the three red flags, just a quick reminder. I mentioned I was going to give you a call back and hoping that you've received some activity and maybe even putting a deal together and you could say you're in escrow. Or, we talked about those three red flags, right? The agent asking for a price reduction, less traffic, right? Or the agent trying to take the home off the market and put it back on the market. Hopefully none of those have happened. Usually I'll get a sigh. Well, actually, all of them have happened. Or
Yeah.
actually, yes, they asked me for a price reduction. Now that opens the door for me to kind of come in and suggest my services or really just suggest a conversation. How about we get together and talk about how we can get around that or what other tricks we have up our sleeve? Because it sounds like your current agent, doesn't have any other tricks up his sleeve. They're throwing their Hail Mary. That's their last resort.
Yep.
If I could share with you some other tools, some other processes, some other resources, would it be worth a few minutes of your time?
So let's just recap a little bit, mate, because this is just so great to break these down. Is that so with the fake expired, you've essentially gone back and you've sort of adjusted based on the situation so that
Mhm.
therefore they're not getting defensive. You've put some red flags into the equation. How long between the follow up? So from the first conversation to the second conversation, how long do you typically leave it?
It depends. When I'm having that first conversation and I'm bringing up the red flags, I usually ask, are you giving them another 2 weeks or 30 days?
Yep.
Right. I'll say 2 weeks or 30 days because I don't want to leave open ended because either they don't know
Yep.
or they're just going to say, call me in a couple months.
Got it.
Right. So, doesn't matter what they say. I'm usually following up in 2 weeks.
And you're trying to, and you're basically enforcing a little bit of doubt in their mind that if they've given them a couple of months, then they're like, well, what do you mean 2 weeks or 30 days? Like, no, I've given them a couple of months. So anyway, I think that that's really great. But
Yeah.
then, the other part of this as well that I'm curious about is that the volume that it takes of these conversations, because I really want people to get an understanding that if they aren't cold callers and if they are, it's just a reinforcement of the fact that volume is important. Jesse, how many calls have you made in order to get this conversation in the beginning to then the second one?
So on average, if I look, and I've done hundreds of expireds. If I looked at the numbers, and on average, I would say it's anywhere from 7 to 12 touches. That's not saying 7 to 12 conversations.
Yeah.
Right. So that could be the video text messages. That could be a mailer. That could be something I send out. It could be a variety, a YouTube video that I think might be helpful. I would say, though, especially to my agents that want to lean towards some of those passive ways of prospecting without picking up the phone, that's just a reminder touch. That's not going to get you anything. They're not going to say, "Oh, I got a video text message from Jesse. I'm ready to have that appointment."
Yeah.
Right. It just, as I mentioned earlier, it connects the dots,
Yep. Yeah.
right? It creates a stronger bond for me to come back and actually ask. And it, honestly, from my point of view, from my mindset, it makes me a lot more comfortable coming in and asking. And although I do this a lot, I still have the same fears as a lot of agents. It's not fun to cold call. I don't love doing it. I do it because I know it works. So, in some cases, it's picking up that phone. I don't remember them. My notes aren't that great. They were tough to begin with. Oh, geez, I got to do this again. But if I've been following up with them consistently in some way, shape, or form, it's a lot easier for me to come in and say, hey, did you get the email I sent you? Did you get the letter I sent you? Hey, just I'm following up. And I think that's an important one from an agent's perspective.
Yeah, I think that the other part about this, and before we get into the real expired process of all of this, is one, be comfortable with the fact that that's going to be the number of touches that you need in any real estate relationship. This is actually a really fast tracked one in order to actually somebody to know who you are and what you do. Because essentially, think about your sphere. It's the same thing with your sphere. They started as a D lead, now they've moved into a C lead by all of the touch points, so then they know who you are. But Jesse, the other thing that I've really loved about people doing expireds, people like yourself, people like that we have within the network of people that we operate within that do this stuff is that I think that people like yourself have really seen somebody a no is actually a good thing in the very beginning, because what is the mental stability of a person that meets you over the phone for 30 seconds and says yes to a perfectly good stranger about their largest asset? You know, I would actually probably not go to their house because I'd be freaked out because they said so yes so quickly.
Yeah. Or the fact that if you got a yes that quickly, how many other people got yeses? So now how many people are you competing with? And let's be honest, with competition, you're either winning by experience, geographical location, or you're going to do it cheaper. And I think right now, when you're in a market where things are moving pretty fast, don't see the difference between don't see much of a difference between the excellent agent and the good agent. In some cases, the not so good agent. So what they focus on is what you're charging them. So if you're not willing to come down in commission, you tend to lose. So I would rather push through to the person that gives me a little bit of a pushback, because I know most real estate agents aren't going to try to get over that wall.
Yeah.
They'll just
Yeah.
give up and move on to the next one.
So let's dive into the actual expired listing now. It's actually has expired. They don't have a relationship with that other agent. It's not that fake expired. What is the
Yeah.
process at that point, mate?
The true expired, right? So
Yeah.
again, scripts, I think that's important, right? Leaning on, what did you plan on doing? And what's funny, Ben, is I remember when I was reading scripts, learning scripts, I would just run right past that question, right? Where did you plan on moving? Where did you plan on going? And it was a big mistake in my career, and I still make it, to be honest with you,
Right.
or at
Right.
least my coach would say that. I think it's important to remind them why they planned on doing this first, right? But I also think the key to break through a wall with an expired is empathy.
Okay.
You have to put yourself in the position of what they felt like,
Yeah.
their struggle, right? Another objection we always get, right, is bring me a buyer.
Yes.
I love that objection when I get that from a seller, because for me, it's like, what I'm hearing based on my experience, and most of my clients have said this, is you see the value in selling your home. You know now's the right time to sell the home. It's probably why you originally listed it. So you see the positive, but you don't want to deal with the negatives, the showings, the open houses, having the sign on the front door. Like, if I could show you a way to sell your home and get you those positives without those negatives, would that be worth a few minutes of your time? Because that's really all they're saying, right? And how many times have you heard Ben say, like, everybody says, like, bring me a buyer?
Yeah. It's so everybody says that. Yes.
But we're not diving into why they're saying that. What they're telling you is, I still want to sell, but I don't want to list.
So in this conversation, then you've made the phone call. Most of the time, they've picked up the phone. It's the real expired. You've said, what have you said in the beginning of that, mate? Is that, hey, I'm just calling to ask you what your plans were, or whatever it is, or what's that been?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times it's just something really simple like, "Hey, this is Jesse Salas. I'm sure you've gotten calls from a lot of real estate agents. I was just wondering when you're going to be interviewing the right agent for the job, right?" I just like to go right into it,
Yep.
because either might as well, if they're going to hang up now, right? And
And
I know, go ahead, go ahead.
no, no. So then, is it then? Well, bring me a buyer and I'll sell my home. Is that typical answer, or what do you typically get then?
It's typically one of those objections that I gave, or yeah, hey, we just decided not to, but bring me a buyer, right? But I'm not listing the property.
Okay.
And quite honestly, it doesn't matter it matters, but it doesn't matter, because then that's when I go to the empathy side,
You're right.
right? Short of the positives versus negatives that I just mentioned, it's like, yeah, we hear that a lot. And so I think the other big part of empathy is also experience. You have to show them that you have experience in working on homes that have been previously listed. And at some point, because you only have this short of time to actually get this across, you also have to share with them that there's a difference between an agent that handles expired listings versus an agent that just lists homes.
Hmm.
And if we want to go even deeper, the difference between an agent that works with buyers, right? Because remember, they all think we're the same. And we know that statistically, majority of agents only work with buyers,
Yeah.
right? And then you take that segment of agents that are working with listings, great, but how many of those agents that are selling listings are selling homes that no longer have a first impression? That's a completely different world. It's no different than like an appellate court if we go to our legal
Can
system.
you go back? Can you go back? Can you go back? Sorry, let's
Yeah,
rewind Jesse for a second. What did you say about first impressions on properties? Say that again.
yeah. So most real estate agents are only selling homes that are brand new, right? Versus the agent like myself that is familiar with selling homes that no longer have a first impression.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you haven't paused and rewind a couple of times, you should right now. Jesse, we're going to cut that into a short. That's beautiful.
Awesome, awesome. So you have to realize that if they all think we're the same, the first thing we need to do is get ourselves on this side of the line versus the other side where all the agents are, right? And that's done by sharing experience. And I know a lot of agents or some agents are watching and saying, "Well, I don't have experience in selling expired listings," right? You could always lean on your brokerage. You could always lean on your team. You could always lean on processes and tools that you've heard, right? Not necessarily your personal experience, but you're familiar. And that's what I think they need to hear. So I was bringing up the legal system because, and I've used this example in the past for people, for sellers, if you win a case, right, but it's appealed, you go to appellate court. You don't use your same attorney that you won the case with.
Hmm.
You hire an appellate attorney. Why? Because it's a different system. Of course, it's different rules. You need somebody that's familiar with those rules. It's no different than an expired listing. And that's how I distinguish the difference between a listing agent and a listing agent that deals with homes that have been previously on the market.
Yeah, I think that this, guys, you can see how Jesse is drawing parallels in different fields to explain the nature of what expired is. I think that there is a great deal and a great reminder for myself as well. There are listing agents, and there are agents that represent buyers. There's agents that do, first impression properties. There's agents that can sell expireds. It's a complete specialty in that field. And the one thing, Jesse, I think that agents are ashamed to do is say to a seller, we specialize in expired listings.
Yeah.
Because they don't want to do that because they don't want to hold themselves to the fact that that's all they do, because everyone's trying to do this as a means to an end to actually just get new listings, because no one ever wants to really do it for a long-term basis. And I think that that's probably the wrong view of all of this. If you're going to do it, commit to it and specialize in it and own it and have it deep seated in you. Do you think do you think that's the case, mate? Is that a lot of people aren't labeling themselves like that?
I think a lot of people aren't. I think nobody's labeling themselves. They're letting the seller label them.
Uh-huh.
That's the problem,
Right.
right?
Right. It's
It's
funny.
our Go ahead.
No, it's funny how that is the case. Like if you just literally said to the sellers, and I've seen this approach work many, many times, we genuinely can help you. I'm genuinely calling you because we have a genuine process that specializes. And guys, when we talk about this, and we'll get to it shortly, is our non-distressed auction process. Over 53% of the listings that we take down the process of auction have been previously listed on the marketplace. Hence the reason that we can have a value proposition in this space. We are the expired specialists. And if someone says, well, that's not what I want to be, well, tell that to the people like Jesse, like other agents that make millions and millions of dollars doing it. Like it's
Yeah,
unbelievable.
yeah. Please don't do it. I'll
Yeah,
take it.
yeah, yeah, yeah. We don't need any more competition.
It's funny. It's another thing that you just said that triggered something that I think is extremely important because you are going to come across that seller that is just going to keep pushing back. And I think there's a right place for the right seller where you have to change your cadence, you have to change your tone, you have to slow down, and you have to say, look, I actually have something that can help you. I understand you're getting a lot of sales calls, but this is what I do, right? And sometimes that pattern interrupt just changes the whole trajectory of the phone call, which by the way is not a good trajectory. And remember, they're getting call after call after call. They're wound up. They're angry. It's almost muscle memory for them to say, "Get lost, stop calling," right? And so naturally, not because of you, the agent, they're just instinctively going to come out angry and upset. But if you could just change your tone from where it was to a little bit slower, a little bit more compassionate, a little bit more genuine, right? They bring their guard down slightly, right? So I'll tell you one thing I do, and this might lead us into our next topic is what I'll do after bringing it down, saying I have something genuine. I say, look, I know you're getting a lot of calls, and I know everybody's saying they're the best, they're the top 1%, they have a buyer. I get it. If I could share with you one tool, one strategy that you haven't heard yet, right? Would you agree that I've earned myself 10, 15 minutes to come over and share all of my strategies and resources? And they'll typically say, yeah, fine, right? And then you get to go into something that they haven't heard. And if you're going to use this, you better have something good that they haven't heard. For us, for me, it's the auction. And
Mhm.
I don't necessarily use the word auction. I'll use a process of the auction. And by using the process of the auction, I could tell I've captured their attention. And then I easily go back to, okay, so I'm assuming you haven't heard this before. So I just want to say, have I earned myself an opportunity to come over? And they'll usually kind of laugh, sometimes reluctantly, and say, yeah, sure, that's fine. Come on
That's great.
over.
Can I
Right.
ask quick question? Why don't you use the word auction?
I know you want to use the word auction. I know you dislike when agents don't use auction. It's not because I don't the fear of them not liking it. It's because it's too much for them to think about in the moment. I'm taking them down a
That's a
journey.
good
I'm in
point.
charge by throwing.
Yeah.
We talked about a pattern interrupt a second ago. That's a pattern interrupt in a different direction,
That's a really
right?
good point. That's a really good point, Jesse. In that moment, they're already hyper overloaded with emotion and wanting to tell you to fuck off as it stands anyway. Why why add deeper confusion to the situation about, well, hang on a second, no, my home's not distressed, or all of those other questions that can come along with the word auction. I think that it's a very accurate point, because don't get me wrong, in some of the other strategies that we hear people say, they say auction at the very beginning to try and stand out, to get them to stay on the call, because they're not as articulate as what you are in finding the actual genuine connections along the process. So no, that
Sometimes a
makes a
punch
great
in
deal
the
of sense.
face will get somebody's attention, right? That's the strategy. Yeah.
Maybe in the
And
wrong way, maybe in the wrong way, but
And
still.
look, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just my direction's a little bit different. If I already have them on the hook, just like a fisherman, I'm slowly reeling them in. I don't need a jerk. And I feel like if I say auction, that's a jerk.
That's
I might
yeah.
lose them.
That's really good. Ladies and gentlemen, Jesse's on today, folks. He's on. He's really on. Now, final question. I want to wrap this up to keep this. It is a bite-sized episode for people, Jesse, because I want them to be able to re-listen to it, because there's been great stuff come out of it. Final question. A lot of people are sitting there going, oh, I don't need expires. I don't want expires. I don't want to do business that way. Um, and again, I'm not saying this because your credibility is pretty set with our listening audience based on the perspective of what you've shared. Is that you're obviously one of the better process-driven agents that I've ever seen. And what I mean by that is the fact that, when you list the property, even if a seller wants too much, you can take them on a journey of showing them the marketplace. And typically your success rate is phenomenal. And you are a very good expired listing agent, not only traditional, and all of the other elements, but expired listings, you've got an incredible success rate. Hence the reason we wanted to talk about this today. Is it because you've done so many expired listings? Is that why that's made you a fundamental, forget expired, forget anything else, just a better realtor in general?
I would say yes. Similar to how we started this full circle, right? It got me on the fast track. It also just opened up my mind to the flaws that we have in our industry, that we keep going at the same problem the same way over and over and over, right? And I'm just thinking this makes no sense on why we continue to go this way. So that's why you hear empathy. That's why you hear experience. There's me distinguishing me from them and everybody else. We just go in with a script. And again, nothing against the script. I think the script is extremely important, but there needs to be more to build that credibility, right? So expireds, I love expireds. It's a large part of my business, but it's not the only part of my business. I think, listening to other people, um, you know, do their listing presentations, make phone calls. I mean, at the end of the day, this isn't just something that I came up with myself. I've heard you. I borrowed so many things from you. I borrowed so many things from other great people. So I think it goes back to what we always know is surround yourself with really good people. Listen, read, watch those that are doing it at a high level and start stealing little things from them, right? And start incorporating it into your own style because nobody can sound like me. Just like there's no way I could sound like you. You got to find your own style, but the only way to do that is to hear other people and borrow from that.
Well, there's a few thousand miles between where you were born and I were born, so that's why you're not sounding exactly like me. But at the same
Good
time,
point.
folks, is that I hope you're ripping everything you possibly can off this episode for Jesse stuff. If you're making phone calls or you're just talking to people in general, you're talking to your database, I think that there's some elements in this in empathy, some good direct questions that are asked, everything in this episode that can be used. Jesse, thank you for being a friend of Rethink Real Estate and coming back on again.
Of course, buddy. Thanks for having me.